The rain hammered against the stone walls of Kensington Palace that November evening. Inside the East Wing corridor, a young sentry named James Whitmore stood at attention outside a polished oak door. His red uniform was immaculate, his rifle positioned perfectly, but his heart was pounding. He had been standing guard for 3 hours. The hallway was silent except for the ticking of an ancient clock. Behind that door was Princess Catherine's private suite. And James had been given one order: no one enters without written authorization from the princess herself. The sound of heels clicking on marble echoed down the hallway. James didn't move. He kept his eyes forward. He could hear them getting closer, sharper, more deliberate. Then she appeared. Queen Consort Camilla stepped into view, flanked by 2 of her personal aides. She wore a cream-colored coat and her expression was stern, the kind of look that had made staff members stumble over themselves for years. She walked directly toward James, her eyes locked on the door behind him. James felt sweat form under his cap. He was 23 years old. This was only his 2nd year in the King's Guard, and now, standing between him and his duty, was royalty. Camilla stopped 3 feet away. She didn't smile. She didn't soften. She simply said, "Step aside." James swallowed hard. His training kicked in. "Ma'am, I'm unable to do that without proper authorization." The aides exchanged glances. One of them whispered something, but Camilla raised her hand to silence him. Her voice dropped lower, colder. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, ma'am." "You are the Queen Consort. Then you know I don't need authorization to enter any room in this palace." James felt his throat tighten. Every instinct screamed at him to obey, to move, to let her pass. But then he remembered the paper folded in his jacket pocket. The direct order signed by Princess Catherine herself, the one that said her suite was off limits during her recovery. No exceptions. Before you hear what happens next, if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what unfolds. James took a slow breath. "Ma'am, with respect, I've written orders that no one may enter without the princess's direct consent. Those orders come from Her Royal Highness herself." Camilla's jaw tightened. The air between them felt electric. Dangerous. One of the aides stepped forward. "This is highly inappropriate. The Queen Consort has authority not over a direct order from Princess Catherine." James interrupted, his voice steady now. "Not in her own private space." The silence that followed was suffocating. Camilla didn't blink, didn't back down. She stared at James as if trying to crack him with her gaze alone. Then, from behind the door, a faint sound. A cough. Weak, but unmistakable. Camilla's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to James. "She's unwell. I'm here to check on her." Shh. James didn't move. "Then I can relay a message, ma'am. But I cannot allow entry." The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Camilla's breathing was controlled, but her nostrils flared. She leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're making a mistake, young man." James felt ice run through his veins, but he stood firm. What happened next would change everything. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rain against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. James could feel the weight of Camilla's stare. It was the kind of look that had ended careers, the kind that made powerful people reconsider their choices. But James wasn't powerful. He was just a sentry. And all he had was his duty. Camilla straightened. She glanced at her aides, then back at James. "I will remember this," she said quietly. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor until they disappeared completely. The aides lingered for a moment. One of them, an older man with silver hair, gave James a look that seemed almost sympathetic. Then he too turned and left. James exhaled. His hands were trembling. He gripped his rifle tighter to steady them. He had just refused a direct command from the Queen Consort. He had no idea what would happen next. But he knew one thing. He had followed his orders. Inside the suite, Princess Catherine sat on the edge of her bed. She had heard everything. Every word. Every tense second of that exchange. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers interlaced, knuckles white. She wasn't supposed to be listening. But the voices had carried through the door, and when she heard Camilla's voice demanding entry, her chest had tightened. Not from fear. From something deeper, sadness, maybe, or disappointment. Catherine had been recovering for weeks. The official statement said she was resting after a minor procedure. But the truth was more complicated. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and she had specifically requested privacy, time away from the scrutiny, from the expectations, from the relentless pressure of royal life. She had hoped that request would be honored, especially by family. A soft knock came at the door. Catherine wiped her eyes and stood. Yes. Your Royal Highness, it's James, the Sentry. I wanted to confirm you're all right. Catherine walked to the door but didn't open it. I'm fine, James. Thank you. The Queen Consort was here. She requested entry. I followed your written orders and denied access. I wanted to make sure that was still your wish. Catherine closed her eyes. She felt a lump forming in her throat. This young man, barely out of his teens, had stood up for her, had protected her privacy when she needed it most, and he had done it at great personal risk. That was correct, James, she said softly. Thank you for following orders, of course, ma'am. Catherine pressed her hand against the door. James, what happened out there? It may cause trouble for you. I want you to know I'll make sure you're protected. There was a pause. Then James spoke, his voice clear and strong. Ma'am, I was just doing my duty. Whatever comes, I can handle it. Catherine smiled despite herself. You're a good man, James. After he returned to his post, Catherine sat back down. She thought about what had just happened, about why Camilla had come, about what it meant that she had been turned away. The relationship between Catherine and Camilla had always been complicated, cordial in public, distant in private. They existed in the same world, but walked different paths. And lately, those paths had seemed to diverge even further. Catherine had heard the whispers, the rumors that Camilla felt overshadowed, that she resented the public's endless affection for Catherine, that every appearance, every photograph, every headline reminded her that she would never be loved the way Diana was, the way Catherine was. But Catherine had never wanted competition. She had only ever wanted peace. Outside, the storm was growing stronger. Lightning flashed. Thunder rolled across the London sky. And in that moment, Catherine realized something. This wasn't just about a sentry refusing entry. This was about boundaries, about respect, about whether her voice still mattered in a world that often tried to silence it. She walked to the window and looked out at the rain-soaked gardens below. Tomorrow, there would be consequences. There always were, but tonight someone had stood up for her, and that meant more than Camilla could ever understand. Morning came cold and gray. James arrived for his shift at 6 a.m., just as he always did. But something felt different. The other guards were quieter. They avoided eye contact. When he walked past the senior officer's desk, the man looked up briefly, then looked away. James knew what that meant. Word had spread by mid-morning. He was summoned to the captain's office. Captain Reynolds was a decorated veteran with 30 years of service. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp. He sat behind a heavy oak desk, covered in papers and photographs. Sit down, Whitmore, Reynolds said. James sat, his back straight, his hands on his knees. Reynolds studied him for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. You caused quite a stir last night. Sir, I followed the orders I was given. I know you did. I've read the authorization. Princess Catherine's signature is clear. Legally, you were in the right. But you also refused entry to the Queen Consort. Do you understand what that means? James nodded. Yes, sir. There are people in this palace who think you should be reassigned, maybe even discharged. They're calling it insubordination, disrespect. James felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Sir, I was protecting the princess's privacy. That was my job, Reynolds sighed. I know, son. In between you and me, I think you did the right thing. But this isn't just about right and wrong. This is about politics. And in this world, Politics can destroy a man faster than any enemy. What happens now? James asked. Reynolds folded his hands. For now, you stay on duty. But keep your head down. Don't talk about what happened. Don't give anyone a reason to come after you. James stood and saluted. Yes, sir. As he left the office, James felt the weight of what he'd done settle over him. He had known there would be consequences. But hearing it out loud made it real. Meanwhile, across the palace grounds, Princess Catherine was in a meeting with her private secretary, Amanda Hartley. Amanda was in her 50s, efficient and fiercely loyal. She had been with Catherine for nearly a decade. The press is asking questions, Amanda said, reviewing her notes. They heard there was an incident last night. They don't have details, but they're digging. Catherine sipped her tea. What are they saying? That there was a confrontation between staff and senior royals. That security was involved. They're trying to piece it together. Catherine set down her cup. We don't confirm anything. This stays private, agreed. But ma'am, there's something else. Amanda hesitated. I've heard from sources inside Camilla's office. They're pushing for the Sentry to be removed. They want him reassigned or worse. Catherine's expression hardened. That won't happen. Ma'am, they have influence. If they push hard enough, then I push back harder. Catherine stood and walked to the window. That young man did exactly what I asked him to do. He protected my privacy when I needed it most. I won't let him be punished for that, Amanda nodded. What do you want me to do? Schedule a private meeting with Captain Reynolds. I want to make sure James is protected, and I want it documented that he acted on my direct orders. Consider it done. After Amanda left, Catherine stood alone in her suite. She thought about James, about his courage, about the fact that he had stood firm even when facing someone who could ruin his career with a single word. It reminded her of something she had learned long ago. Power isn't about titles or crowns. It's about choices. And last night, James had made the right choice. But Camilla had made a choice, too. And Catherine couldn't ignore what that choice revealed. Later that afternoon, Catherine received an unexpected visitor. Prince William arrived quietly, without fanfare. He embraced his wife and sat beside her on the couch. I heard what happened, he said. Catherine nodded. I figured you would. Are you all right? I'm fine. But I'm worried about the Sentry. He doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. William's jaw tightened. He won't be. I've already spoken to Father. I made it clear that if anyone tries to punish that man for doing his job, it won't go unanswered. Catherine looked at her husband. What did he say? William met her eyes. He said he'd handle it. But they both knew what that meant. King Charles was caught between his wife and his daughter-in-law, and no matter what he decided, someone would feel betrayed. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a door. It was about respect, about boundaries, about whether Catherine's voice still mattered, and the answer would come sooner than anyone expected. 3 days passed. James continued his duties, but the tension in the palace was unmistakable. Staff whispered in corners. Senior officials held closed-door meetings. And through it all, James kept his head down, just as Captain Reynolds had advised. But on the 4th day, everything changed. James was called to a private room in the administrative wing. When he arrived, he found Captain Reynolds waiting for him. And beside Reynolds stood someone James had never expected to meet face to face. Princess Catherine. She was dressed simply in a navy sweater and tailored trousers. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and focused. When James entered, she offered a gentle smile. Your Royal Highness, James said, immediately bowing his head. Please sit down, James, Catherine said. He sat. His heart was racing. Reynolds stood by the door, silent and watchful. Catherine sat across from James. I wanted to meet you properly. To thank you, James blinked. Ma'am, I was just doing my job. You did more than that. You protected my privacy when I needed it most, and you did it knowing there could be serious consequences. She paused. That takes courage. James didn't know what to say. He had been trained to follow orders, not to be praised by royalty, Catherine continued. I know there's been pressure to have you reassigned. I want you to know that won't happen. I've made sure of it. You acted on my direct orders, and I've documented that clearly. No one will punish you for doing the right thing. Relief washed over James. Thank you, ma'am. But I also wanted to explain something to you. Because what happened that night wasn't just about a locked door. Catherine's expression softened. It was about something much deeper. And you deserve to understand why. She took a breath. When you join this family, you think you understand what it means. The duty, the sacrifice. But there are things they don't tell you. Like how you'll never truly belong. How every mistake will be magnified. How you'll be expected to smile through things that would break most people. James listened intently. I've spent years trying to do the right thing, Catherine said. To honor this role. To serve the people. But there are moments when you realize that not everyone wants you to succeed. Some people see you as a threat, as competition, and they'll do whatever it takes to remind you of your place. She looked directly at James. When Camilla came to my door that night, it wasn't about checking on my health. It was about power, about asserting authority, about testing whether my boundaries still mattered. James felt a chill. He hadn't fully understood the weight of what had happened. But now, hearing it from Catherine herself, he did. You stood firm, Catherine said quietly. You didn't let her cross a line I had drawn. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Ma'am, I didn't know all of this. I just knew I had orders to follow. That's what made it so powerful, James. You didn't need to know the politics. You didn't need to understand the history. You just knew what was right. And you did it. Reynolds spoke for the first time. Your Highness, with respect, what happens now? The palace is talking? People have taken sides. Catherine stood. She walked to the window and looked out. What happens now is that we move forward. Camilla and I will continue to coexist, as we always have. But she'll know that my boundaries are real, and that there are people who will protect them. She turned back to James. You're a good man, James Whitmore. Don't let this place change that. James stood and bowed. I won't, ma'am. After Catherine left, Reynolds put a hand on James's shoulder. You handled that well, son. But remember what she said? This place can change people. Don't let it change you. James nodded. But as he walked back to his post, he couldn't stop thinking about Catherine's words. About the loneliness in her voice. About the weight she carried every single day. He had always seen the royals as untouchable, powerful, above the struggles of ordinary people. But now he understood the truth. They were just as human as anyone else. Maybe even more vulnerable, because their pain played out on a public stage. That night, James stood guard outside the same door. The hallway was quiet. The palace was settling into its evening rhythm. But James felt different. He felt like he understood something most people never would. He had seen behind the curtain, and what he found there wasn't glamour or glory. It was just a woman, fighting to hold on to herself in a world that wanted to define her, and for one night, he had helped her do it. That was enough. 2 weeks later, the palace returned to its normal routine. The incident had faded from immediate conversation, though it lingered beneath the surface like a current no one spoke about. James continued his duties. Catherine continued her recovery, and Camilla continued her royal engagements with the same polished composure she always displayed. But something had shifted. Those who paid attention could feel it. Catherine had emerged from her isolation. She attended a charity event for children's mental health, her first public appearance in weeks. The crowd erupted when she arrived. Photographers captured her warm smile, her elegant dress, the way she knelt down to speak with young children at eye level. The headlines the next day were glowing. Catherine returns with grace. The people's princess shines again. A light in dark times. Camilla's team noticed. How could they not? Every article that praised Catherine felt like a subtle reminder of the comparison. Diana's ghost still lingered in every photograph, every public reaction. And now Catherine carried that same torch. Whether she wanted to or not, in a private sitting room at Clarence's house, Camilla sat with her closest advisor, Margaret Finch. Margaret had been with her for 20 years, through scandal and redemption, through public scorn and eventual acceptance. The incident was a mistake, Margaret said carefully. It gave her ammunition. Camilla sipped her tea. Her face was unreadable. I was concerned about her health. That's all. I know that's the truth, ma'am. But perception matters. And the perception is that you overstepped. Camilla set down her cup. She's unwell, Margaret. I wanted to help. But she didn't want help. She wanted privacy. And when you pushed, it became about control rather than care. Camilla was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer than usual. Do you know what it's like to be invisible? To walk into a room and feel the disappointment because you're not her? Not Diana, not Catherine, just me. Margaret's expression softened. I know, ma'am. I've spent years trying to earn respect, to prove I deserve this role. And just when I think I've made progress, something happens to remind everyone that I'm second choice. Always second choice. That's not true. It is true. Camilla's voice was firm but not angry. Just tired. I see it in their eyes. The staff. The public. Even Charles sometimes, though he tries to hide it.
Ow.
She paused. I went to Catherine's door because I wanted her to see me as family, as someone who cares, but all she saw was an intrusion. Margaret chose her words carefully. Perhaps the way forward isn't through grand gestures. Perhaps it's through small, consistent acts of respect. Honoring her boundaries, giving her space, letting her come to you when she's ready. Camilla looked out the window. The London sky was gray, as it so often was. And if she's never ready, then at least you'll have done the right thing. Camilla nodded slowly. She didn't say anything else, but something in her expression suggested she understood. Meanwhile, Catherine was having a different conversation. She sat with William in their private residence at Adelaide Cottage. The children were asleep. The house was quiet. And for the first time in weeks, Catherine felt like she could breathe. She sent a letter, Catherine said, holding up a cream envelope with Camilla's seal. William looked surprised. What does it say? Catherine opened it and read aloud. Catherine, I want to apologize for the recent incident. My concern for your well-being was genuine, but I understand now that I should have respected your wishes. I hope we can move forward with mutual understanding, Camilla. William studied his wife's face. What do you think? Catherine folded the letter carefully. I think she means it, or at least part of her means it. And the other part? The other part is still trying to figure out where she fits in all of this. Catherine set the letter aside. I don't envy her position. Always being compared. Always being judged. I know what that feels like. William took her hand. You're more gracious than most people would be. I'm not being gracious. I'm being honest. Catherine looked at him. She's not a villain, William. She's just a woman trying to survive in a world that's never fully accepted her. I can relate to that more than she knows. So what do you want to do? Catherine thought for a moment. I want to respond. Not because I have to, but because maybe it's time to stop letting old wounds define everything. That night, Catherine wrote a simple reply. Camilla, I appreciate your letter. Recovery takes time, but I'm getting stronger every day. Perhaps when I'm ready, we can have tea. Just the two of us. Catherine. Not yet, but it was a door left slightly open. A possibility for something different. When James heard about the exchange weeks later through Palace Whispers, he smiled to himself. He didn't know all the details. He didn't need to, but he understood something important. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is hold your ground, and sometimes it's knowing when to extend a hand. Both require courage. Both require strength, and both can change everything. 6 months had passed since that rainy November evening. The seasons had changed. Winter had given way to spring, and the palace gardens bloomed with color and life. James Whitmore had been promoted to senior sentry, a recognition of his dedication and integrity. He wore his new rank with quiet pride, but more than his rank had changed. The palace itself felt different, lighter somehow, as if a tension that had gripped it for so long had finally begun to ease. Catherine and Camilla had met for tea. As Catherine had suggested, Once, then twice. Then it became a monthly occurrence. They didn't become best friends. They didn't pretend the past didn't exist. But they found something more valuable: understanding. They were two women navigating impossible expectations. Two people trying to honor their roles while holding on to themselves. And in that shared struggle, they found common ground. One afternoon in May, James was standing guard near the rose garden when he saw them together. Catherine and Camilla, walking side by side, speaking quietly. There were no cameras, no staff. Just two women having a private conversation. They paused near a bench. Camilla said something that made Catherine laugh. A genuine, warm sound that carried across the garden. It was the kind of moment that would never make headlines, but somehow meant more than any public appearance ever could. James smiled to himself. He thought about that night 6 months ago, about the choice he had made, about how one moment of courage had rippled outward in ways he never could have predicted later that day. Catherine was in her office when Amanda brought in the afternoon correspondence. Among the letters was one with a familiar handwriting. James Whitmore's mother had written to thank the princess for protecting her. Son. Catherine read the letter carefully. Mrs. Whitmore wrote about her pride in James, about his character, about how grateful she was that someone had recognized his integrity. The letter was simple and heartfelt, the kind of genuine emotion that no royal speech could ever capture. Catherine set down the letter and thought about everything that had happened. She thought about boundaries and respect, about courage and compassion, about the fact that sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest changes. She picked up her pen and wrote a reply, not through a secretary, not on official letterhead, just a personal note from one person to another. Oh, dear Mrs. Whitmore, your son is an extraordinary young man. His courage and integrity during a difficult moment reminded me why honor still matters in this world. You should be very proud. With warm regards, Catherine. When James received his mother's letter a week later telling him about the princess's response, he had to sit down. His mother's words were full of joy and pride. She had framed the note and hung it in their living room, she said. It was now her most treasured possession. James felt something shift in his chest. He realized that what had happened that night wasn't just about duty or protocol. It was about human dignity, about treating people with respect regardless of their title or position, about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. These were lessons his mother had taught him as a child. And somehow, in the grandest setting imaginable, those simple lessons had mattered most. On his final day at Kensington Palace before transferring to a new post, James was given an unexpected gift. Captain Reynolds handed him a small wooden box. Inside was a commendation medal, personally approved by Princess Catherine, recognizing his exceptional dedication to duty and unwavering integrity in service to the crown. But beneath the medal was something even more meaningful. A handwritten note from Catherine. James, you showed me that courage doesn't require power. It only requires character. Thank you for reminding me what integrity looks like. The world needs more people like you. Never change. Catherine. James held the note carefully, reading it twice. 3 times! He felt tears sting his eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. Reynolds put a hand on his shoulder. She doesn't give those often. You earned it. James nodded, unable to speak. That evening, as the sun set over London, James took one last walk through the palace corridors. He paused outside the oak door where everything had begun, the door to Catherine's private suite. It was quiet now, peaceful. He thought about all the lives that intersected in this place, the power and the pain, the public faces and private struggles, the expectations and the humanity beneath them all, and he realized something profound. The royals weren't characters in a story. They were real people facing real challenges. And sometimes, the most important thing you could do was simply see them as they truly were. Not as symbols or icons, just as human beings trying their best. James smiled and continued walking. His time at Kensington Palace was over. But the lessons he learned would stay with him forever, somewhere in the palace. Catherine stood at her window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. She thought about the young sentry who had stood his ground, about the strength it took to do the right thing when everyone was watching. She thought about Camilla and the fragile peace they were building. It wasn't perfect. It might never be. But it was real, and that was enough. Because in the end, the most powerful thing anyone can do is choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment, courage over fear, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to make that choice, one person willing to stand firm, one person willing to protect what matters most. James Whitmore had been that person, and the ripples of his courage would continue long after he was gone. In the quiet of that spring evening, as light faded and stars began to appear, the palace held its secrets close. But this one secret, this story of courage and compassion, would echo through its halls for generations to come. A reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest choice to do what's right, no matter the cost. And that choice, more than any crown or title, is what truly makes someone royal.